Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Cat and Cloud podcast. We are starting off the year by replaying a few episodes that we think can be the most helpful to people. Maybe this year is it. Maybe 2025 is your year that you finally open your own space, your own cafe. Well, part of that new business is finances. They can be scary to some, a mystery to others, but no matter where you fall on that spectrum, finances are a necessary part of any business. So this episode is from 6 years ago, where Charles is reviewing a finance talk that he gave at SCA that year. His talk was all about how there can be a career path for people in coffee, just like there's a career path for people in any other major industry. Also, key things to think about when running a cafe and setting up a new business. It's a super interesting talk, but more importantly, it's super helpful. All right, this is Charles and Chris talking about cafe finances. Enjoy.
Give you a little more volume.
Thanks, dude.
Okay, welcome to the Cat and Cloud Coffee Podcast. Charles Jack is here with me.
How's it going?
Charles.
Hey.
So sweet.
Thanks for having me.
Pretty good. Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah,
We're going to dig into it because we actually have an 11:30 meeting.
we do.
So Charles gave a presentation at the Specialty Coffee Association annual expo, part of the lecture series, and it was on creating sustainable careers in specialty coffee. And you took a look at a few different things. Basically, I'm just going to paraphrase some of what you said.
Yep.
So we can burn through and I can ask you some questions. But the one thing that you started off with, which I thought was really interesting, was talking about the scope of the coffee industry, how huge the coffee industry is. You know, people always say it's like the second most traded commodity right next to oil.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of money floating around overall. So why is it so hard for people to get and maintain a coffee career?
Exactly.
Which is, I want to
It's
know
a
the
huge,
same thing.
right? It's a huge industry. And, through the supply chain and retail in the US, I mean, a majority of the money I think probably still goes to Starbucks. But I think there's a huge opportunity for independent businesses to build careers for people as we grow as an industry. Like JT says, like Jared says all the time, like we're a young industry. And I think there's a lot of room as the independent sector grows to provide better careers for people than we have been doing.
I agree. The specialty industry is growing. And it's like, it's not as big as that big volume Starbucks stuff, but I see that as proof of concept.
Yeah.
That we can have big and efficient businesses while still maintaining quality.
Yeah.
So this talk is super useful for people. I mean, it's really useful for business owners, but it's really, really useful, I think, for baristas. Even though a lot of the stuff sounds like really business owner oriented, if you're a barista and you're tracking to have a career in coffee, take note of these things because of that two-way street. Like, you should have expectations from your employer just as your employer should have expectations from you.
Yeah, totally. And that was something I talked about in the beginning, was for everyone who's a coffee professional, whether you're a barista or a roaster, view everything that we talk about through the lens of, is my company providing this? Are the owners being transparent? Are they thinking about a career path for me? Are they growing and will be able to provide a career path for me? So kind of all that, is the cafe I work for operating, this way and operating well, and is this business successful and going to be able to provide for me later on? So kind of view, it's just as valuable, if not more, for people who are just coffee professionals, and just view what we're talking about through that lens and take it back to the company you work for.
Hella chill.
Yeah.
And I think you maybe talked about this later, but I just want to put it on the table right away, to where if people out there want to have a career in coffee, there needs to be some level of intentionality behind it. And you kind of made the analogy as where if you take a traditional job, let's say you're a software developer or something in tech, and you go to school and you learn these skills, you don't just randomly get a job at whatever place is closest to you just because it's convenient.
Yeah.
But that happens a lot of times in coffee. You're really interested in coffee. You'll go do some training, do some education. You're like, oh, well, I'm just going to get a job at the place down the street.
Yeah.
Which you should be searching out employers based on what you want and based on your career path, and ending up in places where you can grow.
Yeah.
Just being aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a huge part. And I'd love to see more people in the industry take that intentionality and find those companies that are growing, providing career paths for people, and just doing a little bit of that work up front. Or you end up spending 2, 3, 4 years somewhere and then realizing, oh, wait, this this isn't the place for me.
Dude,
Which happens to so many people.
it's
right?
real. Yeah. So to get it cracking, you talked about defining what you think a sustainable career is, and like what happens like, or what do you need to do to get a sustainable career? What does that mean to you? And one of these things is, one, just a certain level of income.
Yep.
And you're arguing that income should be able to
Buy you a house. Yep. Yeah. For most Americans, your house is going to be the largest asset you ever purchase. It's going to be your biggest asset. It's going to be the biggest part of your retirement. And not just for anyone in coffee, but this is for anyone in the US. And that you need a certain level of income that's going to help you get to that point of buying a house.
And then the other thing that you also need out of a sustainable career is some sort of option or path for growth and learning.
Exactly.
Because even though, and everyone's going to write in and talk shit at me for this, like people that say like, I would be a barista forever, you actually aren't going to want to. Trust me. Like you know,
12 years in.
12 years in, you're not going to want to, because I wanted to, and I talked to everybody else who wanted to too. And it's cool. You don't even have to be one to be worth it, but you want some sort of growth, some sort of path. Even if you work in the retail sector, you need to be learning. Humans have this desire to learn.
Yeah.
You need to be challenged. Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of talk about it in the vein of companies in terms of that challenge and growth. The thing that really pisses me off is are companies that, preach about growth and challenging, but then they'll hire in people above you. At Cat and Cloud, we have committed to kind of like 100%, like everyone's brought up from within. And we really think that's the kind of company we want to create. That's the kind of culture we want to create, and we want to reward hard work. And, it may take a little bit more training on our end to bring people up that way, but I think it's 100% worth it for your business, and it's 100% worth it for your people. And that's going to be the difference between a company that I want to work at and a company that I don't want to work at.
So you've got the idea of earning a certain amount of income. That income should be enough to buy you a house. You should have some sort of growth plan, but your ultimate end game, what you're really selling, is that some sort of employee ownership is a real path to providing sustainable careers.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest kind of piece of my presentation that I just wanted to, kind of emphasize, is that for everything that we can provide as a company, I think really a sustainable career in this industry involves some kind of employee equity. And I think we see it a lot in other industries. And, it could be us being close to Silicon Valley. We see it in tech so much, like the entrepreneurial spirit of people in tech in the Bay Area. But I think coffee is actually a really entrepreneurial space as well. You see so many baristas and roasters that have had success start new businesses. So I think it's a really entrepreneurial group of people we have in the industry. And I think, kind of passing that buck forward and getting your employees, that type of ownership and buy-in to your business is really like the way forward for a sustainable career for people to have that ownership.
I have a lot of feelings about this, but I'm going to couch them until now. And we're just going to jam through this thing because we're going to recap on all of these things. So what are some examples of jobs that do pay what you consider to be like a living wage?
Yeah, totally. So in the presentation, I kind of throw out, there's a few studies like Pew Research Center, U.S. Census Bureau that kind of throw the middle class around $55,000 to $65,000. Depending on where you live in the country, there's different like living indexes. I think the majority of people that work in coffee probably live in the like $20,000 to $40,000 range most of the time. It's like $10 to $20 an hour.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, totally. And that's just not sustainable. So getting up into that $60,000 a year range, I think is going to be more sustainable. It's going to put you on a path toward being able to buy a house if you've got a partner who works. That gets you even closer. But I think that's where we've got to aim for, and equity is a part of that.
Right, and those are jobs that are comparable. Things like entry-level software engineer, registered nurse is in that zone.
Yeah.
Someone who's in corporate accounting, marketing, and sales.
Yeah, these are all like professional jobs, and I'd love to see more coffee industry jobs in this area.
Vibing with you. So what's the first step? What do we need to be aware of if we're setting things up? We want to be able to provide for people. you're kind of breaking it down into a few different sections. You talk first about how you structure the company, secondly about how you run your operations, and then third about like some sort of growth plan. And the kind of mantra that you keep kicking around and around is what?
Yeah, if you don't structure and run a good business, there won't be money to take care of people.
If you don't structure and run a good business, there won't be money to take care of people. I had to reiterate,
Yeah.
double down on this. And this was a huge part of live at SCA.
Yeah.
The intro that I gave for you was kind of based around this, which is
Yep.
we have a lot of ideas. I don't know how to do the numbers. It doesn't make sense to me in my mind. So you're super valuable in that aspect. And it's also really close to my heart because I've seen a lot of people who are really, really talented at coffee and really, really good with people have businesses that are floundering, suffering, or even failing not because they're not smart, but just because no one showed them this.
Yeah.
And they're not respecting this part, not even respecting, they're just unaware,
Yeah.
I guess, is more like it.
Yeah, totally. If you've never been exposed to it, you wouldn't have experience in it. But I think it's that much more important that anyone who's starting their own company who doesn't have, someone on their team with a financial background to try to find someone, find a mentor, find somebody in your network who has a little bit of that financial background, just to take a look at what you're doing, go over some things, like brainstorm with them, throw ideas around, and just gain a little bit of knowledge. It'll help you get up that learning curve on the financial side like that much faster.
And you said a specific number there. I can't remember, but you were saying if the person who does your books can't deliver them by the 15th?
Yeah, totally. It's like, right, for most people that don't do their, financials or books in-house, like everyone who owns a business should have a bookkeeper who's giving you the previous month's numbers by the 15th of the next month. So if you own a business, you operate through March, your bookkeeper should be giving you the financial results for March no later than April 15th. And if your bookkeeper can't do that, you need to find a new bookkeeper, because that's like standard bookkeeping practices.
That's their job.
Yeah.
Hold them accountable.
100%.
100%. Get it dialed. So you talk about structure, and the structure that kind of we run and the structure that you prefer is like that single entity.
Yeah.
Whether it's a LLC or a S Corp or whatever isn't super important right away. But let me just ask a couple different questions.
Yep.
And probe a little bit. Why the single entity versus, making each store its own entity?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. I like the single entity structure for its simplicity. I also think about it in terms of, if we are going to be carving out part of that for employees, it's much easier to carve it out of one entity than to try to figure out, you have 4 or 5 different entities and what that looks like.
So if you had like 5 entities that were all different stores, and then you wanted to give someone X percent of your company, you would carve out like micro percentages
I don't
of
even
each
know
LLC,
how that would work.
and then your taxes would probably be gnarly.
Yeah, I think just
an allocation.
Yeah, it makes looking at the numbers so much simpler. As well, I think it gives you a bit greater buying power with people like the bank and investors, just to be able to very easily and succinctly put your numbers together and show them all in one place, versus showing all these different structures. There's 50-50 structures, there's 75-25 structures with different ownership pieces for investors versus operators. And I think just trying to keep it simple will really help you down the line.
And in the lecture, you talk about, some of the struggles that startup faces, but aside from preferring this single entity for simplicity and flexibility, you're also advocating retaining as much ownership as humanly possible.
Yeah, it's the number one, like one of the biggest things to take away from this talk is like, how, as you're starting a business, how can you structure it to retain as much ownership as possible? And even I had some conversations at Expo with people who mentioned, they'd started out maybe in more of like, starting a cafe and raising some money to help pay for it. And if that's the case, the thing I suggest is really to try to form an entity above it that has, if you start roasting, form that roasting entity above it so that you own, you essentially own all the equity in that business.
You got the
And
umbrella
then-
corporation.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. It's like setting up the umbrella that really is like the bigger owner in the company, and then having the cafe just be a piece of it.
Interesting. So that would, so even though, would that be a separate entity too? That
Yeah.
would, and
Yep.
that would be to give someone the flexibility to kind of retain ownership of the whole corporation while being able to get started with a cafe if they don't have a lot of money.
Yeah. And then you really hold all the equity to the roasting operations, which are really valuable.
Gotcha. Okay. Super, super dialed. I'm going to scroll through here.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. There's multiple slides, if anyone was there, of if you don't structure and run a good business, there won't be enough money to take
Yeah,
care
it's
of
my mantra throughout.
take care of people. So structuring your business the right way, basically the way that gives you the most flexibility
And helps you retain the most ownership.
and help you retain the most ownership. I guess that's what I mean by having the most
Yeah,
flexibility.
totally.
Because you can always get rid of ownership, but you can't always get it back once you've given it
Yeah,
away.
it's a lot easier to give out than get back.
So if you start at like 50% ownership of your own company, you only have so much that you can parse out to
Yeah,
your employees, which
exactly.
is really important if the idea that we're driving towards is, excuse me, employee ownership is the key
Exactly.
to sustainable careers.
Exactly.
And then along with that initial structure, and this is where I think a lot of people really got big use out of this, is running top-notch operations, what you call best-in-class operations. Like
Yep.
basically being able to run your business so that it generates the money and the profits that you need to be able to take care of other people.
Yeah, exactly. If your business isn't running as well as it can be, then you don't have the money to take care of people. So this is something where really by focusing, really on these operations and metrics, like that's what's going to give you some of the buying power to help take care of your employees down the line. And as we kind of talk through some of the numbers here, this is a specific business model. It's not a restaurant business model. It's a cafe, coffee shop model, and this works. Like this, I've seen it in other businesses, consulting or working there, and this is how we live it at Cat and Cloud, and it's helped us move kind of methodically from 1 store to 2 stores to what'll be our 3rd and 4th stores later this year.
And then there's a couple things to note before we talk about these numbers.
Yeah.
One, how you said, this is the model for a cafe. So if your business is mostly food-based, this might not be your model.
Exactly.
If you run basically a restaurant that serves nice coffee, that's cool, but this is not going to be your mix. The second thing is that you're paying full price for coffee, wholesale price for coffee. So if you own a cafe and a coffee roasting company, you need to run those as separate businesses.
Yeah, business departments.
Business departments, and not subsidize one the other. So, for example, if your wholesale price for coffee, let's say it's like $10.50 a pound, you should be selling coffee at that rate to your cafe
Exactly.
and not passing it through at cost.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be.
Yeah, like $3.50 or $4, right?
Right. Because, and we've done this we've been at businesses that do it this way, but it actually creates like a false sense of profitability of the cafe.
Yeah, totally. It's really hard to compare numbers, with other businesses when one is subsidizing them and the other's looking at as kind of like its own full standalone business. So I really prefer and think the right way is to look at, for your cafes to pay full wholesale price to your roasteries, and as well in the same for pastries if you guys run your own bakeries. And that way your cafe is comparable to every other cafe out there. And that's where you can really see how well you're running the business or not running the business when you're able to create a comparable situation.
Right. So if you took like Kristen or Tanner, who are managing the stores, and they have their own P&L that they manage, they know that if they're running a really awesome cafe, let me back up one step, because this is kind of how we think about our operations. The cafe should be its own sustainable business.
Correct.
So if the roastery goes out of business, we could theoretically still get wholesale coffee and be as profitable as a cafe as we are now. And the same thing with the roastery too. The roastery should be its own standalone profitable business. So if we lost the cafes and just had like the space and money that was allocated to the roastery, we could run a wholesale business out of the roastery.
Yep. And you just really need to keep things to keep them separate and because then you're going to be able to see where how you're operating in each business and how well you're doing. And yeah, just to like what you said, that each one should be separate and profitable.
And you've got some benchmark numbers that
Yeah.
you want people to hit. And first one is daily average.
Yeah. So the first one we talked about was, your cafe daily average. And essentially, if your cafe can't do at least $2,000 a day, I don't want to work for you. And I kind of asked the audience at SCA, why is this? And got some good answers. But really, it comes down to, if we're viewing this through how we're going to be able to provide for our employees down the road, if you're making $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a day, you're not going to be able to scale this business with enough profitability to be able to take care of employees in a number of ways. Benefits are going to be tougher to provide. Ownership, if you're able to give it to people, your company's not really worth enough to for what you want to give your employees to make it worthwhile. And then any income that derives from that equity ownership is not going to be very much. So that's why I kind of throw out that number.
It's a problem. It's just a problem of mass scale. So I want to dig deeper, because this was a pretty challenging number for some people.
Yeah.
Some people are like, dude, what does that mean? And to reiterate, we're not saying that if you don't make $2,000 a day, you suck. There are a lot of shops out there that operate with lower daily averages that are probably providing great, what do I want to call them? Livings for families. So let's say you're a single entity shop. It's like a mom and pop shop. You're running that $1,700 a day. That's enough to take care of you and your family. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
No big deal. But at those numbers, you can't expect to take care of yourself plus all the other people. You can't expect to retain employees for 5, 10, 15 years because you have nowhere for them to go.
Exactly.
You have no opportunity for them, and it's a function of sales.
Yeah, that's my point with that. And, we kind of look at it, right, that number is a combination of your number of tickets and your average ticket. Our average ticket's between $7 and $8. So we know that every cafe we open, we need to be pretty 100% sure that we can get at least 300 people a day through our doors starting out. And if we can't do that, we need to pass on that cafe, and we shouldn't be spending all the time and effort it takes to open a cafe there if we're not going to get the return that we need from it.
And I would also, for people who aren't here yet, I wouldn't see it as a discouraging number. And everyone's market's a little bit different, but I would just encourage everyone to approach this number with a really open mind. And if you're not there, figure out a way to get there. And there's no plug and play method to get there. How we do our dailies is totally different than how someone in LA is going to do it. Is totally different than how someone in really rural areas is going to do it. And it might mean shaking yourself out of your own box of what you think your business needs to be. And that's okay. Give yourself the freedom to be creative and do things that you maybe didn't plan on. Because if you can increase your daily average, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something that happens in coffee. Don't be too proud to change the game.
Yeah. I mean, on that same page is we talk to people who own one cafe and never want to grow. Again, if that is what you want to do, that's cool. But as a coffee professional, I don't want to go work for you because there's going to be no future for me there.
You're going to have a limited lifetime there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's fair. 2K a day. That's the new hashtag.
That's tight. Yeah, the next thing that we look at, and really an important part of how you're running your cafe, is I kind of had a slide going through kind of the cafe gross margin. And the metric that we really look at here is 60% or above.
And that's total gross margin.
Total gross margin. It's the money you have left, right? It's your sales minus the cost of all the goods, minus your cost of goods, or the cost of all the products that you sell. Gives you your gross profit, and your gross margin is just a percentage of sales.
And this, we're going to make a worksheet for this, or just a one-pager.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
We'll link it in the description.
Yeah, because it kind of goes through. Yeah, in this business model, what our sales mix looks like, and what our margins look like for our different product categories. So, I mean, run through them.
Run through it really
super
quickly.
quick.
Yeah. So sales mix would be like how much each item you sell is contributing. So
Yeah, so we sell like 60% coffee, 20% food, 12% whole bean, 5% tea, RTD, and like 3% merch is like 100% of your sales mix.
And it's important to realize that if you have a cafe and roasting company, we're talking just numbers for the cafe.
Yeah.
So these are not, when you're talking about whole bean coffee, that is not your whole bean sales from the roastery. That's just whole bean sales out of the cafe.
Exactly.
Because someone was like, we sell more whole bean than we do regular coffee. And that's like, that's intense.
Yeah.
Maybe not true.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah. So it's that sales mix combined with certain margins that you're getting on each of those product categories. So you're getting a 66% margin on your coffee, a 50% margin on your food, a 45% margin on whole bean, an 80% margin on tea and other, and a 35% margin on your merch. And so that mix and margin combination yields around a 60% margin.
And 60%
gross margin.
And that's just like the safe spot because it gives you enough wiggle room.
Yeah, it gives you the cushion for all the other expenses that we're going to talk about in a minute that still provide you with the income that you need at the end of the month.
Okay. So let's dig into some of those other things that you have to pay for that we love.
Yeah. Oh, and super. I mean, I kind of like this question as well. We talked about it at Expo, but the difference, one of the biggest difference between a cafe business model and a restaurant business model through the numbers that we just talked about is that food sales mix percentage is going to be a lot higher in a restaurant, and it's generally going to have a lower margin. And so that really, you end up with a lower gross margin at the typical restaurant versus a cafe, which ultimately makes a restaurant a riskier business than a coffee shop.
Which you basically make up through volume.
Yeah, you have to push volume, but that is just part of the risk, that if that volume doesn't get there, you're left with less cushion, kind of like we talked about, to get that income.
We'll see how that goes next year. So biggest business expense.
Yep. Yeah, it's your labor, your payroll. And I threw out some guidelines to work with, 25 to 30% of your sales to keep labor within those boundaries. If your cafe labor percentage is lower than 25%, you're likely not paying not providing much in benefits or pay. You're potentially burning out and rolling through a lot of people, which you'll see in increased training costs. Anyway, if you're higher than 30%, you're maybe not running as efficiently as you could be. And high above 30, you're going to start to see that be pretty impactful into your business in a negative way, just from a financial point of view. So 25 to 30%, and that's an all-in number. That includes health insurance, PTO, payroll taxes. And for us, we're closer toward like the upper end of that range, around 30%, just due to the benefits and things that we provide.
Yeah. And then someone asked a really good question, which was, are our salaries included in that? And Jared's salary is directly allocated towards the cafe, as he is head of retail.
Yep.
But our salaries are spread out in other parts
in different
of
parts
the business.
of the business. Yep. That was
a pretty good question.
Yeah.
Whoever asked that question, I have no idea. Good for you.
It was tight.
And then biggest fixed costs.
Yeah, I put up this slide at Expo of, it's a picture of our cafe and kind of asked the audience, what is your most important fixed expense to get right? And 100%, it's your rent structure of the cafe you open. I kind of joked that like the slide should have been titled like "Bad Leases Will Kill You,"
right?
Because it's super important. Signing bad leases where your rent structure, where you're paying a lot in rent, it's going to give you really a higher hurdle to profitability. Finding those really nice lower rent spots where you still believe you get the traffic, that's going to be like a low hurdle to profitability. And so, and once you lock in your rent and your lease, it's really hard to change it. So just throwing some benchmarks, like our rent at Portola was around 3% last year.
3%
of total sales.
Of total sales.
Yeah. 5 to 7 is you're in like a good zone. I've seen 10%. That's not good. And sadly, I've seen 15%, which is even worse. And when I kind of couch this in that, like, your total operating expenses for the cafe should be 10 to 15%. So when you start to get up in that 10 to 15% zone just for your rent, you are making things really difficult for yourself.
You're already pinched.
Yeah, you're already in a hole.
And then you talked a little bit about the landlord kind of relationship, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, I think that's something that's underestimated by people, and it's super important. I mean, at best, a bad landlord can hinder what you're trying to do and make life really difficult for you, and at worst, it can totally cripple your whole business, particularly as you try to go get a loan or work with the bank. There's certain things that the bank needs to see the landlords do.
Yeah, talk about that. What was the thing that like Dale had to sign off or whatever?
Yeah, your landlord will have to sign off kind of like a release of assets within the cafe because the bank will want to hold those assets as collateral. So that's something, if you're funding a new cafe with part of a loan, something to be aware of, that talk to your landlord about that up front and make sure they're willing to do that, because that'll just, that'll speed the process as you're going through the loan. So yeah, really, try to establish that good landlord relationship, because it'll really pay dividends down the way.
This wasn't part of the talk, but how would you recommend approaching a landlord? Is it almost like the same way you'd approach interviewing someone? Obviously, it's a little more sensitive.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, that's the ideal, is that the landlord, shares some of your values, wants you to be in the space. Once you kind of prove your concept with one store, store 2 or 3, ideally they see kind of what your brand is and see the value that your business brings to their space. I mean, coffee shops are great for landlords. It's usually the highest traffic space within a landlord's building or buildings. So
you also mentioned that they take in money every day. What was that?
Yeah, and I mean, they're pretty solid businesses when they're run well. So landlords should definitely it's pretty like high value business for them to have in their space, and increases the value of their buildings. So, I think it's just finding someone who appreciates your business and your brand and wants to see you succeed.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And we experienced that with, first and second. And then the third lease that we signed, it's cake at that point.
Yeah.
Because people can come in to stores number 1 and 2 and be like, yeah, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I obviously want this in my building. The first one's the struggle.
Yeah, the first one's always a struggle. But after that, I mean, if you've done a good job with the first one, you often get people approaching you of like, hey, I've got this space and I love what you're doing. We'd love to have you, come into our space. And that's where, you get into landlords providing tenant improvement dollars, free rent until you open, things like that really make your life easier when you're starting the cafe.
Nice. And net income, magic number.
Yeah, so this all kind of filters down to your income percentage that you get at the cafe at the end of the month. And I'm going to throw out that 15% is great. I mean, 15% net income for a cafe is kind of where you're maximizing the financial abilities of the cafe while not sacrificing service or burning out employees. I think that's where you need to try to get to. I mean, 10 to 15% is good. And honestly, that's where we were at Portola last year. We were in between 10 and 15%. We're still pushing for 15% for the year. That flows through to so many other parts of benefiting our business.
What's like the lowest you would feel comfortable going?
Yeah, I mean, you really...
Like dipping below 10 is pretty bad.
Yeah, dipping below 10, you're really not giving you're giving yourself like a pretty low threshold for if something goes wrong.
And is there, with that net income, so all the money that's left over, do you specifically want to see a certain amount of money in the bank at all times? I know we talk about cash flow on different things. Do you have like a buffer cash that's like a percentage of your overall operating expenses?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that gets kind of into like a larger company, right? You'd want to have that for each cafe as well as for like your business overall. Somewhere between 1 and 2 months expenses as a cash number is like a good general buffer, cash buffer rule.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good knowledge.
Yeah. And then, I mean, talking about the low end of where you want to be, I mean, most restaurants every day, every year operate in the 5 to 10% range. And again, that's just why that business model is riskier, because if something goes wrong, they've got less of that buffer to help them get through it. So
Push the volume,
yeah, exactly.
crank that bad boy up.
Yeah.
And then we looked at a P&L, which isn't really useful here, but just
Yeah.
basically is a visual representation of all of those numbers that we just talked about, and broke down one of ours from real life, which was what, $2,600 daily average one of the months. And we're pretty close to all those numbers. So 59.6% gross margin instead of 60. That's pretty good.
Yeah, we're in the zone.
15.2% net margin.
Yeah.
Sweet. You know.
Yeah, and it was really cool, and I got a lot of good feedback at Expo from throwing up. I threw up our P&L from December last year, or just like actual P&L, and kind of walked through it, and just got really great response and appreciation just for the transparency that we show. We go through our cafe financials with our whole staff around every 3 months, and I've got nothing but positive feedback from our employees just about how it helps them tie what they're doing to kind of how the company overall is doing.
Such a major key. There were a couple questions at the end of your lecture, and a couple of them, they were going in the same direction, which was like, how can I explain what I'm trying to do to my people? Like Chach asked a question. He's like, I have a lot of ideas. Like, how can I present ideas so that I make sure that they're in line and I'm not like thinking like way out in space? And one part of that is like mission, vision, values alignment.
Yep.
But I think sharing the numbers with people creates like a real perspective around what is possible and what's going to be a really big challenge for the business in the next coming like quarter, half year, or year, because it puts a little bit of weight on. I gave examples like when I was younger, I thought like, okay, cool. Like you open a business and then you have a bunch of money. Like everybody who owns a business is basically rich, or that there's just money. They see money coming in all the time. Like there's shitloads of cash floating around a coffee shop. You know what I mean? But seeing where all that goes and just looking at like, I'm looking at the numbers right now, like payroll. Wow. That's a big number. Rent is a pretty big number. Selling, marketing expenses, like everything, you've got your depreciation, your bank fees, just all these little things that most people don't think of. And I think sharing these numbers really kind of...
Yeah, it helps people see the bigger picture and get alignment with kind of how you're looking at the business and alignment to what they're doing on the day-to-day and how it connects it. I think it's huge.
Yeah. It's kind of scary too, in a way. I remember when we saw like it was those first couple of months, the amount of money that like actually hit the bottom line. I was like, wow, that's not a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, dude, it's there's a slide in here that's like running a business is hard, and there's a lot of expenses, a lot of unknowns that happen, while you're running a business, and so. There's a lot of places where kind of managing the cash is like a big job in and of itself.
It's all huge, man. I don't even know. It's just no idea. So we've talked about structuring your cafe in the right way, hitting your numbers. Another thing that is important for people to succeed or have sustainable careers is this idea of growth.
Yeah.
And then growth is basically, growth can be like this dirty word that people talk about. Like, oh, people talk to me all the time, you guys going to get big and sell out? And I'm like, well, we might get big, but that doesn't mean you have to sell out.
Yeah.
Big is not necessarily bad. And it's growth, not so that we can buy Lambos or whatever. But let's say you have someone, let's make it real.
Yeah.
Say you have someone that started with a company. Let's say Alex. He was part of our first round of hires. Never had a coffee job before. He's in. He starts coffee. He's like working behind the reg, whatever. We've grown as a company, and every time we've grown, he's been able to kind of ratchet up his position. So now he's like he's like a wholesale team lead, right?
Yep.
If we took the company and kept it the exact same size that it is now, boom, there goes his opportunity for growth. There goes his ability to have a career.
Yep.
Because he's not meeting that like where we want him to be, like
Yeah.
where we see him in like 5 years, he's not there. And to be able to generate that kind of revenue, you need to grow.
Yeah.
You just have to.
Yeah, and I mean, made a joke like we don't mean you need 50 or 100 stores. We're not trying to sell our company for like $1 billion to Nestle, but
Yeah.
like think about growth, almost reverse engineering the idea of growth, and think about this is what I want to be able to provide for my employees, and so this is the growth we need to get there, to have our company be worth something so that it's worth something to employees, to have it have the income that it needs so that employees' ownership, that income is flowing through to them. So, for us, we throw around the idea of like 10 stores, and that kind of growth will help us provide as we like carve out employee ownership for people, provide them a good value and provide them a good income in addition to their salary.
Yeah, that's great. And I think of businesses that people generally love, or people have like that are fanning out on. Like I don't know. There's Apple's got this cult around it, right?
Yeah.
And no one's like, man, Apple was better when it was just like two dudes in a warehouse. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of the things they do for people, that's great. And they're big, but they're not bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe you think they're bad. Chuck thinks they're bad.
PCs all day.
PCs. Your PC's literally melted.
Yeah. That's a different story.
Heat wave. At the end of the day, you've got all these things that can help you structure and run awesome business. But again, what you're selling is that to make it real, employee ownership is just a huge part of the equation.
Employee ownership is the key. And that was kind of the real push of my presentation, is really just to get a bigger conversation started in this industry around employee ownership, and how can we all as an industry do this for our employees.
And then there are some things that we're doing right now that everybody can really do that are kind of first steps, like on the path to ultimately ownership. So some of the examples, which you've probably heard about before if you listen to the podcast, are retail profit sharing. We do 10% of the cafe profits split up amongst the
it's
employees.
10%. Yep, 10% of all the profits are split pro rata by all the retail staff, part-time and full-time, just by hours worked.
Right. Paid vacation. So full-timers get 4 weeks paid vacation. Part-timers get 2 weeks paid vacation.
Yep.
And we encourage everybody to take it, that is also just as important as providing the vacation.
Yep.
Is giving people the permission to use it and telling them that they should use it.
Yeah.
Because you can give someone vacation all day, but a lot of people are just like, I don't want to take it because I don't know if there's like a stigma that they're going to think I'm a bad employee because I'm taking my vacation. So if you give people vacation, please encourage them to use it.
Yeah, 100%.
For real. Helping out with health insurance. So paying 50% of the health insurance. And there's some people who are young that are on staff who are still on their parents' insurance.
Yep.
So they get basically $100 wellness stipend.
Yeah, they could, whether it's yoga
Get a massage
or
or-
Jared corrals them to go to CrossFit,
He's like, oh, you're coming with me.
Yeah.
Take them on trips. So you've seen and heard about some of the Origin trips that we do. We've taken like a third of our staff to Origin and or SCA, which is rad. I think we spent like $22,000.
Yeah, we quantified it the other day.
Quantified it. 22 grand. And that's money well spent. I don't see that number and it doesn't freak me out. I'm just like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Just going on those trips and seeing how it affects people on so many levels, it's way worth it.
Yeah, I think everybody that's gone for the first time and come back kind of had their mind blown, and it really helped them see the from seed to cup, like the impact they have.
And just the idea of doing something for someone that you don't have to do because it's, you know what I mean? Like you own a business, you've been coffee forever, you've seen processing, you've seen this stuff. It's like, yeah, you don't have to send your employees, but like, why would you not?
Yeah.
It's like sharing that love and they appreciate that.
Yep.
External education. We spend about $15,000 on external education.
Which again is part of bringing people up from within, right? We're committed like not to hire, outside people in above our people. And so part of that is going to be an investment in us, particularly like our leadership team. We have the 3 of us and 7 of our employees on what we call our leadership team that meets quarterly and kind of talks about a lot of the bigger issues our company faces. And part of bringing those people up to be leaders in our company is an investment.
It's an investment. And here's the thing. If you want to hire outside people, be ready to do just as much, if not more work than promoting someone from within, even if that person within has like absolutely no skill.
Yep.
Because the leg up that they have is that they know the culture.
Yeah.
They're already integrated into the team. And no matter how good someone is at something, if they don't get that portion of it and they can't integrate, they're basically worthless.
Yeah. It's not going to be a fit at all.
And cultural integration takes a really, really, really long time, which is nice because once people come in, they come through the door of Cat and Cloud into either the cafe or the roastery and then work up. By the time they've got to that level to where they're ready for something else, they're already culturally integrated.
Yeah.
It's saving on training costs.
That too. You said
Put that in the book.
That was in JT's presentation last year.
Oh, yeah. The turnover costs and training costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about tips a little bit and making the point that, like, yeah, we don't pay people tips. That's something that our people earn and that our guests give them. But taking an active role in setting up an environment that promotes making enough money in tips.
Yeah.
So if your standard of business is like an unfriendly, kind of grungy, dirty cafe, you're not setting your employees up to make the most money that they could in tips.
Yeah, and our employees make credit card and cash tips together $5 to $7 an hour, which I think is toward the higher end of the industry. So it's like putting in that structure that will help them succeed on that level.
And then someone's gonna write in who works in like the psycho high volume, like whatever, and they're like, I make, it's like that's cool, and we're proud of you, but that's not normal.
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, all of these numbers can look better if your cafe is doing $5,000 to $10,000 a day, dude. Like
for sure,
living the dream,
balling.
Yeah,
you got to crawl before you ball.
Yeah, and so on the next slide and kind of going through, we can kind of talk about why employee ownership, right? As an owner, why is it worth me giving ownership to employees?
Right, and that sense of connection and alignment is one of the biggest things. Like you're literally bringing someone into the fold with you. So instead of just being like a bystander or just someone who's looking from the outside in, you know how it is when you own something, you take like really good care of it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, this is mine. And it's not just, it transitions from that like clock in, clock out life to like, this is something that I am part owner of and I have a vested interest in seeing that succeed.
Yep.
And more so than just wanting to see it succeed. It's like your baby now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just the kind of culture we want to create. I mean, then everyone starts thinking about the bigger picture, is more interested in the company as a whole succeeding versus, like Grace, who's our roastery team lead. Sure, it's like you could, incentivize her to run the roastery, in an amazing fashion and just have her focus totally on that. But then you open up a conversation to ownership in the company, and all of a sudden, I think her mind goes from just focusing on the roastery to really integrating with the rest of the company and seeing how her department fits in with everything else going on.
Man, that's such a good point. I don't think. Did you talk about that at Expo?
No.
Man, that is such a huge thing. There is this like. There's these departmental barriers and it's
extreme ownership. I did throw the extreme ownership book out.
Yeah, and
that's part of it.
Yeah, which we were going to do a podcast on that today, but the Chuck talks were so hot.
Yeah,
we'll
do that one again though. But yeah, you roll on that.
Yeah, no, I just think that's something that I see as a weak point in a lot of companies, that people are basically fighting for their department, which is important, but it's so key to know how you interface with the rest of the organization, because you're not the only one out there. And without that understanding of how the puzzle piece fits together, you're lining yourself up to be butting heads with other departments.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Like everyone needs to be on the same team.
Yep.
And if you do it right, you have this like amazing circle of life You know what I'm saying?
Circle
In
life.
the sunlight.
Yeah. No, it's just that interdepartment connectedness versus, I've seen it before. The roastery and the cafe is kind of probably like the oldest example of like people butting heads and maybe not understanding the other people's goals or what they're trying to do. And so the more we can bring them together and get them united around.
Yeah.
One
Or like
cause.
roastery and wholesale.
Yeah.
That's like a train wreck just
Yeah.
fucking waiting
Yeah.
to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just,
I need this.
I need
today.
this now. I need
10
this
minutes,
yesterday.
5
You can't do
minutes.
this. I won't do this for it. Ah!
I know.
I don't know. I would just, as a base level, I would look at how you interact with other departments,
Yeah.
just the same way that you would interact in a customer service situation.
Yep.
How can
Well,
you
and really, I mean, we talk about it more in the book, but like actually getting to know the leaders in other parts of the business and taking the time to show them how you work, like invite them into your department and
Right.
let them see how you work and go visit them in their department and understand what's important to them.
Like if someone's not, there's that example of the factories where someone's not producing for you, they're not getting their stuff delivered on time, they can't do it. It's probably not that you just don't want to. Everybody wants to make money.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the team to win. So like, go talk to them. See, like, hey, this is what's going on. Like, are there any challenges that you have? Like, can I help you? Let's figure out some creative ways to do this together. And then everybody wins. Because there's that old, everyone's feeling like, oh, it's not my fucking problem.
Yeah.
But actually, it is your problem. You're on the same team, bro.
Same team.
You're on the same team.
Yeah, and and again, so like that's a big piece of ownership I think in the culture we want to create is that really we're all on the same team.
And you have here everybody wins in the ownership situation. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think of what we want to do as a business holistically. And we've been the people making $10 an hour, in other businesses. And I think I want to create a business where everybody wins, where we're able to create livelihoods for ourselves and for our employees, where we're all in it together. And I think when you're owning something together, that you're winning and they're winning, and that everybody's winning versus, this is mine and I built it and it's my baby. And I don't know what people think. Like, oh, you guys are.
I'll tell you
I just replaced
exactly
you
what
guys.
people think, dude. People don't want to, and I've worked with people like this, and it's fucking insane. Like, people think that since it's their business, they're solely responsible for that business's success or failure. When in reality, as an owner, you're a huge influencer, but you can do just a tiny percentage of the tasks all by yourself, especially if you're talking about having a business of some scale and providing for other people. And let's say you own 100% of your business and you don't want to give up like 2%, 5% to someone because you think that like makes you less powerful. It's like the most bullshit ego trip that you could ever be on. And it's like, okay, buddy, be ready to be fucking doing the shit that you don't want to do 10 years from now. Because I know people that do that and they're like, cool, I own a cafe. I own all of it. Guess what I do? I go to cash and carry. I go to get like whipped cream chargers from the store. I go to do all these like dumb tasks that I should actually pay someone more to do or get someone invested in my business so I can focus on the next big thing, which for us is creating new opportunities for people to grow in the form of more wholesale business, more stores, maybe diversifying revenue streams and some other things, not to make money, but to lift those people up. And if we can have like the stuff that we've done to do it without help, fuck that. We would not be here. Like we say it all the time, but our team is gangster and they're super strong, and like it's part of them just being badass and part of us just letting them be badass, and that's like faults included. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, sure, no one on our team is perfect, and we certainly aren't perfect as owners either. But we're learning different things, they're learning different things, but I just like I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but it's dumb.
Yeah, because I want Grace
I'm angry.
dude,
so
with you, man. Because these people, like, we can only do so much, and we see on the daily how all of our leadership and all of our employees are building so much value for the company and pushing the company forward and doing so much. And I just want to have a business, a community where we're all in it together, where Grace and Tanner and Kristen, Nicole, like that they're with us 10, 15 years down the line and we're all in this together.
Plus, it's like, let's say you take that 100% that you own. What fucking difference does it make if you give away a certain percentage of that? Like, is it really impacting you that much?
Yep.
Or is it just your pride getting in the way of what you should do? Like, is it going to kill you? I'm not saying give away your whole business so you only own like 15% of your store or anything.
Yeah.
You want to keep the direction right and like, but it's just like what I can't really
carving 10 to like the
I can't
standard
really
is
think
kind of
of
like
why.
carving 10 to 15% out
Which
for your employees.
And I can't think of a good reason why that doesn't work. And if people are out there saying, "Oh, my employees are lazy. I don't think I have the right people. I wouldn't want to give these people 10% of my company." I would fucking go stand in front of a mirror and look at yourself and look at what kind of people you're hiring. How are you training them?
Yeah.
Are you putting in enough time with them to make sure that you can get those people? Because I will tell you that people are fucking out here talking shit about millennials and stuff like that. And it's like, these people are smart. You know what I'm saying? Like, these people are capable. Some of them, there's always like weird, like there's always people that are not right fit for your businesses.
Sure.
And maybe you have some of those. And if you do, it's up to you to get rid of those people too.
100%.
So if you have the wrong team, that's your fault.
Yeah. Yeah. And to flip it around and talk from like the coffee professional point of view, if you have owners that aren't being transparent, aren't showing you things, aren't talking about long-term career plans for you, you might want to question like what you're doing there.
Right. Get out of there. Try to help first, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, go down that path, see. But if you're at a dead-end road, I mean, the sooner you realize that, the better.
Yeah. And it's all about finding those companies who want to take care of people. Well, and it's like that are right, that are structured well, that are making money, that have growth opportunities, and that have owners who want to provide longer term careers for people.
And I hope that that's not just like this. You know, I know there's other people that believe this same stuff, and I think every job that, like everything I do, I wish I would have done it like 4 or 5 years earlier. You know, but I couldn't see, and I was in this like scarcity mindset to where like, fuck, I can't move on. Like, there's nothing else. This is as good as it gets. And I don't know. I don't think that's true. I don't know what the answer is, but get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Don't let people take advantage of you. It's not chill.
Exactly.
It's totally not chill. There's a ton of other tech companies that do this. You know, you cited Whole Foods, WeWork, REI. Like
Farfetch.
Everybody knows companies that give back. And the point is that, you know, this model is real. It's not just like a dream model. It's just going to take a little bit of work and some crazy gnarly people to bring it into the coffee industry.
Yeah, and I talked about it at Expo, where our goal is to have something implemented by the end of this year. So so you'll be able to kind of follow along, and we'll talk more about it on the podcast. Right? I mean, first we're gonna talk at our next offsite with our leadership team about this stuff and about what direction we all want to go. And yeah, we'll kind of continue to like chronicle it on the podcast as well.
I changed my mind. I don't want to give up any of my percentage. You guys give away your percentage, and I'll just keep my 33.
Yeah, exactly. This guy.
You talked about different kinds of ownership. And different levels, like basically how you would take and split up those profits. The basic and easiest one to do, which is what we do now, which isn't really ownership, is profit sharing.
Yeah.
So taking a percentage of the bottom line and splitting it up.
And it's the simplest for people who want to start doing something, but maybe, are on the smaller side or there's always legal and tax consequences to each of these. I mean, profit sharing, that's a great place to start, particularly if you do it within your whole company and you're taking the whole company bottom line and kind of assigning people different profit sharing percentages. That's like a great place to start.
The cool thing about profit sharing, I'll say, is that like anybody can do it, because as a percentage of the bottom line, you can always carve that out.
Yep.
Now, it may not be a lot at first,
Yep.
but it's still there. The second thing, which is kind of the same way that vacation acts, like even if it's not a ton of money, the actual act of doing it is like a pretty cool gesture.
Yep.
Because it just doesn't happen everywhere. So to have someone go the extra mile, be like, hey, like I really believe in what you're doing. This is cool. Here's this. And then even though it's not quote unquote ownership, it does give people a sense of ownership.
Yep.
And also a little bit of empowerment because they see like, hey, if we can like get to that $2,000 a day and crunch these numbers a little bit harder, like that amount is going to go up.
Yep.
So you have some sort of control.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a couple different equity options.
Yeah.
Phantom equity. What the heck is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a few different, as you kind of like go up the complexity scale in kind of how you give away equity. So phantom equity plans versus full equity option plans. Fanny
equity.
Fanny. As I was kind of doing a lot of research for this presentation and just for our company, a lot of the people I talk to that have smaller businesses use phantom equity plans. And it's with full option equity plans, there's a lot of tax consequences and legal structures that you have to be aware of. What, like legally, how your business is structured, it has to be a certain way. And as well, with any kind of equity, you run into, particularly with equity option plans, one of the downsides is you run into awarding people equity, which is taxed as income that year, but them not necessarily deriving the benefit of it that year.
So it could actually be bad for an
you
employee.
could actually have somebody who like that we gave you equity worth this much and it's taxed that year.
Oh, so you actually made less money that year because of what you paid.
But even though they're not receiving any real money for that equity.
Because it's based off the valuation.
Exactly. So that's where phantom equity plans are nice and easier to implement because there's less of that legal and tax complication involved. To where you're essentially giving your employees rights to percentages of the business, to income of the business, to you can put kind of like a change of control piece in there. So everything that a normal kind of equity incentive plan can do, a phantom equity plan can do. It's just usually less legal issues, less tax issues, and it's easier to set up. So those we'll kind of be talking between the two of those mainly when we meet with the team in May.
Phantom equity and equity options.
Yeah, but I'm probably at this point leaning toward some kind of phantom equity plan.
An equity option plan is basically the standard, just like you get the percentage, but you also get all the tax shenanigans with it.
Yeah, and it's with a phantom plan, you can set it up over time. Like I like the idea of giving small percentages to people over time, that become theirs over time.
It's like an accrual process, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not about just throwing a bunch
Dumping
of
equity
against the wall, but it's structuring it in a way where people are earning it over time as they're providing value to your business, as they're becoming leaders and growing and influencing your business. They're rewarded in that way with more and more pieces of equity.
So it's like the equity is like kind of growing with their development.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Exactly.
And then equity grants.
Yeah,
you talked about that for like kind of the corporate bigwig who comes in and...
Yeah, just to kind of cover all the majority of the different ways people are granted equity. Straight equity grants are usually more at like the executive level, people coming in and straight getting like a percentage of the company, like a new CEO or a new CFO or somebody really influential to your business coming in and you kind of awarding them part of that. Maybe they are taking a little bit lower salary or something like that, and you're straight giving them equity, which again has all the like legal and tax consequences of like the option plan.
Like if we discovered there was another Jared Truby, we wanted to have him also be an owner.
Another third.
We're going to give you a grant. One more third. What?
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing I kind of talked about is a bit of a sidebar, but when you're starting a business, just think about how many owner operators you have. We have 3. And so, yeah, I mean, I got some questions afterwards, kind of, how do you guys as owners pay yourselves? And that's part of, I mean, the growth that's involved as well is like when you have 3 owners, we each have a third, we need to get to a certain level of growth just to give ourselves sustainable income and things like that. Like I talked to somebody after my lecture who had 6 owners.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's going to require some planned growth to get them in a position to provide for their employees.
Because for the record, the thing, like the benchmarks that you talked about earlier, we're not hitting yet. Meaning, like, we don't make enough money to buy ourselves a house. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I asked a question at Expo of like how many non-owners owned a house, and it was almost no one. And then how many owners? And there were a few,
like 10
but
maybe.
But we were not
out of a room of hundreds.
Yeah, we were not the ones raising.
No houses yet.
Yeah.
It's a plan.
Yep.
We want to get there.
Yep. And that's the thing. It's a plan, and we're kind of planning for how we can get there and then how we can get our employees there.
And someone also asked, like, do you take salary or do you take a draw? And we take a salary because we want that W-2 income that will actually hopefully help us buy that house whenever we reach that income level. Because if you only take a draw, you basically have no paper trail to get a loan for a house.
Yeah,
right?
It's harder. So we're an LLC, but we're taxed as an S corp, which allows ourselves to, as owners, to pay ourselves W-2. And so when you're paying yourself W-2, we're paying into Social Security. You do pay a little bit extra as a company in payroll taxes, but we're kind of willing to do that to show that W-2 income, pay into Social Security for as we get older. We're not that old, right?
Not yet.
Okay. But yeah, that structure allows us to take W-2 and just kind of put us on the path of least resistance to be able to get to buy a house in the future.
That's what's up, dude. That is like the bulk of the lecture.
Yep.
There also is, I wanted to throw this out here.
Yeah.
There is a link, and we'll put this down low too. If you go to catandcloud.com/responsibility, Chuck's building a newsletter.
Yeah.
A newsletter for, well, you tell them.
Yeah, and this kind of my call to action at the end of the presentation was...
You got 3 people signed up. Why only 3, everybody?
Come on.
Get together.
Well, I think if we make the link...
We'll make the link hot, yeah.
Easier to...
It'll be a hot link.
To get to, too. But really, I want to encourage roasters to... really, I want to create a resource where companies are offering, maybe through like a survey, what kind of pay, benefits, any equity incentives or growth opportunities through a survey of roaster retailers, so that coffee professionals, and kind of like publish it maybe like annually, so that coffee professionals can see what different companies are offering what. I think it would be a really cool resource for everyone who works in the industry to see, but then also I'd really like to push coffee company owners to do more and to provide more and just to be intentional about how they think about their employees' futures, I guess is the biggest part.
For sure. And I think a lot of it sounds really overwhelming and it can sound really big. And I was talking to some people at Expo specifically about education, but I think the same mindset applies here. And it's talking about all of like the orientation and the onboarding and the documentation, and people are like, how do you even find the time to do that? And my answer was, you just in your head make it a non-negotiable thing that you have to do.
Yep.
You decide that it's going to be as essential as someone walking behind the counter, clocking in and making coffee. It's just a part of your business.
Yep.
And once you make that decision to where it's like, okay, I'm going to own this, we're going to do this, then you're committed, you find ways to figure it out.
Yep.
And I think that holds true for this. It's like, maybe you don't have all the answers right away. Maybe it seems a little overwhelming, but take that one step. Be like, I'm going to do something more than what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do it.
Yep.
Like, go there.
Yeah. And again, I mean, part of it just with the mantra throughout is you've got to structure your business right. You've got to run your business really well. and then and by doing that, then you've got the money to provide some of these things. And if you're not doing those first two things, then you're going to be like, I don't have the money, da da da. And I mean, I would really like to encourage people to continue to push and try to get to the place where they are in position to take care of people.
It's so fucking real, dude. So real.
Yeah, passion, dude. That's what
Passion.
That's, yeah.
And the funny thing, this is maybe more tangential or whatever, but it's like how this stuff looks on paper, especially if you're a new business owner, everything actually feeds each other. So I know a lot of people go in and you think like, okay, like I have this much equity and I make this much money. The more I spend, the more I give away, the less I'm going to have. And it's actually the complete opposite, which is the more you invest in people, the more you're willing to give away, the more you're willing to empower, is actually the more you get back.
Yeah.
And I would, we can look at our P&L and our daily averages and what we sell wholesale and what we do on the website. And if we took back all of that money that we spent on origin trips and took back all of that money that we spent on external leadership, that money, it's not like, oh, that'll be added to the bottom line. It's like, no, because we didn't spend money on those things and invest time in those things, actually our daily average is going to be lower. Our wholesale program is going to suffer. And like the whole business is going to shrink down.
Yeah, it's an investment.
It's an investment. It's an investment. That shit accrues over time.
Yeah. And the other thing, just one thing that somebody asked at the end of the lecture as well is like we've been able to do this in a year and a half, but what's a timeline that, because it's hard, like just opening a business, we didn't do a lot of these things right away because we need to see that the business is going to succeed and going to operate. And I think that's normal. But I think giving yourself like 3 to 5 years from when you open, to get some of these benefits out, to get, something like an equity plan in place. I think 3 to 5 years is a good goal that you can have as somebody who's just started a business in the last couple of years,
right?
To plan for and think about it along that timeline.
That's a good point. Because when we started, we were just like, okay, we're going to do the vacation for sure, and we're going to do the profit sharing.
Yeah,
and we came right out of the gate with those. Yeah, we added the health thing later.
Yep.
Obviously, we didn't have any origin trips right out of the gate, but we started those in the first year. But that's a good point.
Yeah. So you definitely give yourself a kind of plan over a number of years to get there.
Cool. That's the Cat and Cloud Chuck podcast.
Yeah, dude, that was
SCA
awesome.
edition.
I know. And thank you to everybody that came to see the presentation last weekend. It was really awesome. It got me like super jazzed.
Hey everyone, that's the podcast for the week. Thanks so much for listening. If you heard something that inspired you, let us know, or tell a friend. These are the types of connections that are the most important to us and that we seek to create every day. If there's something you heard and you want to know more about, send us an email to podcast@catandcloud.com or head to our website, catandcloud.com/podcast, and let us know. While you're on our site, check out everything we have to offer. Dive deep into one of our single origin coffees or pick up a little treat for yourself. We have something for everyone, so check it out. Also, find us in the usual places, YouTube, Instagram. We're always there sharing amazing things. All right, that's it. Thanks everyone for being awesome. We'll be back next week.